Well, hi there. So I was asked to speak today, come up with a topic, and I'm thinking, what do you tell a group of so many accomplished, successful people about how to be a success? And I thought, well, I should really speak from something where I have a lot of experience, something I can dig deep, for material. So I thought, why not how to be a successful failure? And the title, No, you're doing it all wrong, pretty much is the message that I was getting as a kid growing up and being wired a little bit differently. But I think we've got enough talent in this room probably to run a small country. So hopefully you'll find something in this that is your story as well. I'm sure it very much is. But little pop quiz here. So looking at these two guys, you got the 20-year-old high school dropout and a 35-year-old MBA summa cum laude. Which of these two guys do you think is going to create the most valuable company? Which guy? The 20-year-old? Why is that? And a great hoodie. Okay, so keep that in mind. We'll come back to that a little bit later. So, don't want to blow my own horn here too much, but since the age, it's really more like 16, I've done 8 tech startups. 3 of them have been pretty much what you call blockbusters. So anything that's kind of, I guess you'd say a sub-billion-dollar company probably makes it into that realm. About $3 billion in revenues with these companies, over 3,000 man-years of employment in the United States, and the sale of these companies have netted about $1.2 billion. Now, I wish I could say that all went in my pocket, but, we have investors. One company sold for $550 million, Drive Camlytics, which was all about driving safety and accountability. Life-proof protective cases for your smartphones and tablets. That company sold for about $325. And then right now, my most recent startup that I'm a co-founder of is called Interpreter, which is doing clinical analytics and genomics. And, well, I'm not going to go through this whole list, but it even surprises me sometimes. So got an MBA from one of Australia's best business schools, Masters of Engineering Science, Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year Award, also several innovation awards in product development and so forth. And I've lived an amazing life. So I've got to meet with presidents, with royalty from around the world. You can see the picture here on the right at the upper house of the Duma in Russia. I was actually, you can see here, I was coordinating the whole deal for the election of Donald Trump. So since I was a little kid, I was born in 1970, which is right at the crest of the whole space race in the United States. And I was fascinated, even at the age of 2, by these rockets they were sending to the moon, this idea that we could go to other planets. I was captivated by it. And even at the age of 4 and 5, I learned to read at the age of 4. My mother bought me the Childcraft series of books, and I'd read about the inventors like Edison and Tesla and Louis Pasteur, and I thought to myself, like some kids, they know at the age of 4 or 5 that they want to be a fireman or a policeman or something like that. For me, I knew I wanted to be an inventor. In fact, it wasn't just that I wanted to be an inventor, I just knew that was my destiny, and just quietly knew that that's what was going to happen. And I had a fabulous childhood, absolutely loved it. As a kid, at the age of 5 and 6, I would literally dream resistors and capacitors, transistors and things, because we weren't really into the whole computer era there yet. But I thought it was just almost supernatural what you could do. Radio transmission. I mean, it was like, how could you actually send your voice across television? All of this sort of stuff was just mind-blowing to me. So I did all I possibly could to learn, and I was soldering and making my own circuits at the age of 6. And of course, as I got a little older, my ambitions got a little higher. Anything high voltage, anything involving pyrotechnics. I learned to make gunpowder at the age of 10. And we kind of did it on an industrial scale. So my reputation in the neighborhood, luckily I was in a small country town because, these days it would kind of be considered perhaps domestic terrorism. But, we definitely had some amazingly good times. Everybody in the town thought that I was totally the mad scientist. Many of them were actually frightened of me. And anyway, so this is a little clip from a movie called Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs that I kind of identify with a lot. It's a bit of fun.
Honey, I think your shoes are wonderful.
Everyone just thinks I'm a weirdo.
So, people probably thought that these guys were weirdos too. But that never stopped them. I was saving this for your birthday, but here.
A professional grade lab coat. Just like the real guys wear. It fits perfect.
The world needs your originality, Flint. You just have to grow into it. And I know that you're gonna do big things someday.
From that moment on, I was determined to invent something great.
Remote-controlled television.
Eventually.
Hair unbalder! Ah! Flying car! Monkey thought translator.
Hungry.
How wise.
Hungry.
No, Steve! No, please, just leave.
Hungry.
Ah! Rat birds.
Hey, what's going on, little guy?
So I definitely had some bad experiments. Having such a great start as a child, you kind of see how the path progresses. Maybe a lot of you can relate to this. You have great academic accomplishments from an early age throughout school, and then you have the accolades and adulation from family, church, and the school community. Strong support and encouragement from educators, and expectations of success. And then it goes on to all of the great offers you get from the schools, the Ivy League schools, and the attendance that comes, the wonderful jobs that happen after that. And then maybe you go on, after making some great money, you go back to school and get a graduate degree or a PhD. And then, you're seen as a highly eligible bachelor. It's nice to have choices, isn't it? And then finally you go on to academic, professional, social, and financial success, esteem, popularity, and community acceptance and influence, and a comfortable and rewarding career in life. Does this sound familiar? It wasn't to me either, I can promise you. So on the left here, this is me on my first day of school. This is when my world changed in a devastating way. So school for me was a horribly invalidating experience. I'll talk about that in just a little bit. But just to give you a glimpse of how bad it was, I did all I possibly could to stay away from the school environment. It was so incredibly toxic, even a little bit dangerous, with lots of bullying and ostracism and so forth. And at the age of 10, I figured the only way I could really get away from school was by being sick. So I had to master the art. In Australia, we call it the sickie. So I had to master the art of the sickie, and one day I took it a little bit too far. So, stomach pains, they're kind of like hard to pin down and, deny or anything. They don't show up on an X-ray. So I kind of honed in on this as being the way to be able to stay home from school. My mother took me to the emergency room. They declared that I had acute appendicitis and had to have emergency surgery today. And I tried to tell them, no, honestly, I just wanted to get out of school, please. But they figured that I was just afraid of the surgery, and so I was making excuses. So you can see that somewhere there is a pickle jar with my appendix in it. So rather than the virtuous cycle of rainbows and unicorns, I had a rather inglorious start. So this was right around the period of time when there was a dispute in the church in Australia about Desmond Ford. My grandmother happened to be, she thought it was interesting on some of this topic. She was, in a very shabby manner, excommunicated from the church, and by proxy, my family was considered to be infidels. So it was a rather difficult environment when you're going to school in the church school for 5 days a week, church on Saturday, and then Sunday as Pathfinders. So there really was no escape. It was a very difficult time. So, I'd get this rejection and condemnation by the church community, and, how do you deal with that when you're a 6 or a 7-year-old kid? So for me, at first you don't know what's wrong, but then you start rebelling. When you figure you can't do anything right anyway, then might as well have a bit of fun at it, So you start pushing the buttons, not following the rules, asking the wrong questions in Sabbath school. There was all of the bullying at school and so forth. There was teachers that privately took, I think, great delight in psychologically abusing me. So one of them was the deputy headmaster, and he literally said to me, he'd ask questions like, "Do you walk the streets at night?" So he actually accused me of being homosexual. And he would say to me, "Why don't you just quit? You're a complete waste of life. You're wasting your time here at school." And literally that voice was the voice that I heard the times when I considered suicide. So this is real. There's a lot more to it, but that's not the point. So there was a lot of toxic gossip. I ended up dropping out of high school at the age of 17. And I figured at that point, university and higher education is closed to me. So my father was very much, he had a very successful business with a farm. He wanted me to follow in his footsteps. And he saw the technology, I guess you call it, all of the work that I was doing that, not really as being work or something that was going to end up in a legitimate career. So for him, that was difficult too, to see me kind of gravitating towards those things. But the realization you come to with all of this as a 17, 18-year-old kid is, I'm not going to make it in the world the traditional way. So this pathway of higher education, the great jobs, all those sorts of things, wasn't going to work out. And so you realize you got to play the game differently if you're going to win. So enter the crucible. So at this point, age 17, I leave the small country town I'm in, and I take jobs as a repair technician. So first I was repairing video games and then computers. And I was good at it. But I realized that this was a dead end, that I wasn't going to be able to do what God had put in my heart. And God had put in my heart that I wanted to be an inventor, that I wanted to do things that was going to have an impact, or in some way was going to make life a little better for people. And so I just took it deep in my heart to study, and I did all through school. I probably missed half of school. I was away with, call it sanctioned truancy, by being at home. So I homeschooled myself, but not the traditional school curriculum. It was computers, it was electronics, it was everything related to technology and being able to, I was taking on crazy projects and stuff at home. So by the age of 20, I started a computer graphics card company, and I developed all of the hardware, all of the software drivers, everything I actually did myself, launched that company, and moved to the United States of America. I had no money, or virtually no money, so I had to live sleeping on the floor on a futon mattress at the factory, showering in a wheelie bin, like literally going to the bathroom and hooking up a little hose, and then getting a wheelie bin and standing in it, and then kind of having a shower and stuff. And I lived like that for about 5 months while I was getting the product ready to go to market. And then after that company launched, it was quite successful, but the company I licensed it to, they took the money and ran. I developed another computer graphics card company called Opal Vision. This one was genuinely a great success. It became the de facto standard 24-bit graphics card for the Commodore Amiga. And that went great until Commodore computers went bankrupt in 1994. So then I had no money. I didn't have a work permit in the United States. I was literally living in the car and couch surfing with some friends, and for about 3 months. And then basically, I figured, I'm going to have to find a way to do something. And I developed a digitally controlled bicycle light, which ended up transforming the industry back then. And then I decided, I'm going to pick it back up again. I'm going to start studying at night. I went to night school, started getting my maths in good order, taking other classes and so forth. And then the sirens called me again with the idea to start the company DriveCam. So again, I had just been newly married, had a little bit of money in my pocket from the successes with the bicycle lighting product, and we just threw it all out there. We put everything. We went down to $120,000 in credit card debt to start the company. So we were looking over the edge. And it was 5 long years. But essentially, what happened is once the VCs came in and some of the Ivy League investors, it was such a success, they wanted a lot more of it for themselves. So they essentially conspired to take the company from me, and I ended up getting extremely diluted with down funding rounds, which they did, and they pushed me out with the whole illegitimacy angle, like, well, what would you do? No, I've got a Harvard MBA and a Stanford engineering degree, and you're a high school dropout. So what good could you possibly be for the company? And I got pushed out. So, kind of licking the wounds here a little bit, I went back to Australia. My father had terminal cancer, so we wanted to spend a little bit of time with him before he left. And I just kind of was kicking the tires, like, maybe I could get a bachelor's degree. Maybe now is a good time to do that. And so I went to Queensland University of Technology, which is a great school there. I was talking to some of the guys, talking to them about what I'd done with my business degrees, and they said, you're not the usual student here. Why don't you look at if there's a possibility about entering the MBA program? So my wife, one thing you'll learn about being a success is you're never a success alone, and you never could be. And one of my biggest success factors is my wife. And she challenged me. She said, you know what, you've raised millions of dollars for your ventures. You've done these successful companies. You've been able to make presentations all around the world. Why don't you go and meet with the dean and tell him you want him to let you into the master's program without an undergraduate degree, and you want him to give you a full scholarship? So I thought that is pretty darn audacious. But then she put the kicker in. She said, you know what? If you don't get a full scholarship, I don't want to come back here to Australia for you to study. So no pressure or anything. So I met with the dean. I said, hey, I want you to let me in the MBA program without an undergraduate degree, and I want a full scholarship. And he kind of looks at me like, who are you? So I said, well, actually, I have a little presentation I've prepared here. I cracked open the laptop and gave him the background. Bottom of the line is they can't just do that. So they said, you know what? There's criteria. You have to do the GMAT, we have to look at your GPAs, you have to have sufficient work experience to even consider this. So I had 2 days to study before we left to come back to the United States, the GMAT. And most people, they study for 6 months, to try to get this. I didn't know how I did. I just sat down, it was proctored. I almost got finished, not quite, before the time ran out. And I just figured, whatever, we're done. Anyway, we headed back to the States. New Year's Day, I get this phone call. When can you start? You scored in the top 5% of the GMAT. You've got a full scholarship MBA. We need you to start. We need you to be here in February to start. So, I just figured, hey, this is a real blessing. This is the first time. Can you believe it? These guys, at schools, they think I'm okay. I better put my effort in here, right? So I jammed on the MBA, graduated in the top 1%, went on to do a Master of Engineering degree, graduated with a 7 out of 7 GPA with that, and it was kind of a surprise. Hey, I'm not stupid after all. Like I really can, I really can do it at school, So then after school, there was this, I call it walking through the desert, when there was this expectation, like, finally I'm legitimate. Like, can you believe I'm like these other guys? I have an MBA, top of the class, all of that sort of stuff. Surely this has got to work for me now. Like, come on, bring it on. Bring on the rewards. So I moved to Austin, Texas. We were living there for about 4 or 5 years. I was entrepreneur in residence at the Austin Technology Incubator. Looked at 3 different startups, kind of, none of them really were in the groove of, once I got into it, they had problems. And we decided again to change gears and do something different. Moved to Australia. At that point, loved surfing, running, cycling, doing all this stuff. But your smartphone doesn't like doing those things. And after my daughter got a hold of my phone, I think it ended up in the bathtub, and another one ended up being used as a walking block and getting scratched all over the floor. I thought, wouldn't it be amazing if you could take your smartphone into every area of your life without ever having to worry about, say, dropping it or water or anything else like that. I started the company LifeProof in Kira, Coolangatta, Australia. Came to the States in 2010, launched the company, and I'd love to say it was all easy sailing from there, but it was probably the hardest thing that I've ever done in my life. But it had worked out in the end. And then after that, I barely got time, a couple of months after my obligations with the acquiring company, before 2 other co-founders came to me and said, we really want to do this whole genomics thing. We think you could help us develop the algorithm. How about it? So I started that company. It's done really well. It's in a staged acquisition right now with a publicly traded company. And I put 3 years of effort into that. But then I got to the point where I realized, you know what? I've given my startup magic. And the thing that I really want, the most important investment that I have to make right now is my family. And it had been like 20 years of just continual total absorption with the ventures. So we've just completed a 5-month motorhome trip around the US, and it's been an incredible time. So sabbatical, really, really important to take those times to step back, think about where are you going in life, what are you doing, what is important to you, and that is somewhat what this is about as well. I am going to be starting a program at Georgia Tech, a Master's in Artificial Intelligence, coming up in a couple of weeks, so that's going to keep me busy again. So back again to this question of who's going to create the most valuable company. It turned out it was the 21-year-old high school dropout with DriveCam at $550 million. So a successful failure's lessons. First thing is, you can do what failures do and you become a professional failure. You can become really good at that, but it's just not that fun. Life isn't that fun like that. I've learned that by studying other successful entrepreneurs, figuring out what they do, you can learn those skills. There's a saying that you are the average of 5 of the closest people that you hang out with. So upgrade your network. This one is critical. No one else can fix your current situation. And dependency is absolutely the kiss of death. This is where I think Ben Carson is right about the fastest way to get to improve people's situation is to get them off essentially welfare. You have to realize if it's to be, it's up to you. It doesn't matter how you got here, but you've got to figure and make the decision. You've got to do whatever it takes, whatever it requires to become competent, to be able to make it in the thing that you are aiming for, that is important to you. Self-defeating attitudes and negative thoughts are completely they'll get you nowhere. This is another one. It's so easy to work on what's fun and easy, but a lot of the time you have to work on what's hard and necessary to be successful. 40 hours a week is for survival. It's not for success. It's going to take more to really become successful. And competency is key. You can have your visions, you can have your dreams of what you want to do, but if you don't know how to do it, or if you don't know how to learn how to do it, you're not going to succeed. There's a couple of great books I'll look at the end, but essentially a growth mindset is absolutely critical. And that is where you realize, I don't know this now, but I'm going to figure out how to know it. And I'm going to learn it, and it's okay to completely suck today because I won't tomorrow. Just watch me. Just never stop learning, though. Learn to forgive yourself and others. We've all made terribly embarrassing mistakes. We've done things we've regretted. That's life. But the most important lesson is to have gratitude about what you can learn from your past. Some of these things that help you to become who you are. Character really matters. Now, the unreasonable power of vision and perseverance is astonishing. So a vision is incredibly important for you, not just for yourself, but it's the vision you share with others that gets them excited about jumping on board and moving forward and creating this reality that doesn't exist yet that you're wanting to create. So failure is okay too, as long as you quickly learn from it. And if you didn't read between the lines, 8 startups, 3 blockbusters, that's all right. You learn from that. And there's no teacher like pain. And again, your friends, your family, your mentors, those people that walk this sacred journey with you called life, they are the ones where you're developing success together. I'm not going to read every word on this, but the point is, I did a meta-analysis of 17 different significant articles on entrepreneurship and what does it take to become a successful entrepreneur. I've been able to distill it down to essentially 15 traits, and they essentially are passion and a pursuit of excellence, a tolerance for ambiguity. You've got to know your market well, so it's not enough just to have an idea and run with it. You've got to know it's going to work. You need self-belief. You need optimism. You need adaptability and flexibility because everything's going to change. You're going to run into lots of obstacles. You've got to be really resourceful. You've got to be versatile. Creativity is really important. You need to be open to possibilities. Of course, you've got to be willing to take risks because it's going to require risk, and it's probably going to require more than you ever imagine once you get into it. You've got to have a vision, the big picture orientation of how this is really going to change things. And the bigger and the bolder the vision, the better, because little visions are just not very exciting. You want to get people excited. You want to be excited about it. You need to be unafraid to break the rules because by definition, entrepreneurs have to break the rules. The way things have been done previously, you're trying to push things further forward and you're always going to get resistance. You need to be decisive, tenacious, have perseverance, and you have to be action-oriented today, not tomorrow. You need to be motivated by the mission and the vision. I've never looked at, as the ventures have been unfolding, about how much money I'm going to make from them. Money has never been the main motivator. It's always been about what you're wanting to accomplish, how this is going to make things better. You never want to stop learning. I spend about 2 hours a day reading books. So whether it's on technology or personal development or how to be a better leader. You got to keep your health and your life in balance to an extent too. Now, that might seem like an oxymoron as a founder and when you're running startups that just run 1,000,000 miles an hour, But this is the engine which drives your energy. And if you lose that, you don't have anything. And then ultimately, you need to be guided by character, principles, and values. And I find the best ventures have strong values that underpin them, that guide you and that help to drive you. And as I looked at this, I know this is ASI, we're supporting a lot of different missions and so forth as well. It kind of struck me that missionaries and entrepreneurs, are really quite similar. We're both kind of operating on the fringes, in non-traditional environments. All of the same skills I found that need to be a successful entrepreneur are also the same as for missionaries as well. And we've all got investors that that are funding us. They have their own KPIs that they want to see perform on, ROIs, and they often have their own wishes, which may or may not be helpful. Your clients, whether it's the people you're serving or you're ministering to, in many respects, there's a lot of similarities between customers and meeting their needs. You have the team that's helping you get there and do what you're doing. And then, of course, you have the environment, which is the competitive landscape, the other people which are in there working with that too, laws, culture, politics, all these things that you got to work with as well. Wow, bad timing. Is it hurricane season or something, or tornadoes? Or are you guys, whoa, are you getting this? Wow, this is shocking. I don't know if I can get AV. I'm going to airplay this, see if I can get this up on the screen here. Hang on a sec. We're all going to die. There's a point here. We are. We live for 70 or maybe 80 years, if we're healthy. And even in the prime years, there are troubles and sorrow. They pass by quickly and we fly away. Psalms 90:10. I can't tell you how urgent this is. Just this last week, I had a good friend of mine in Australia suddenly die. And young guy, healthy, fit. And the greatest tragedy, I believe, would be if inside of you have a mission, you have a passion, you have a talent that you haven't taken to the world. And you don't know what tomorrow brings. So it's urgent that today you do it. That, again in the Bible, Ecclesiastes 5:18. So here is what I've seen to be good and fitting, to eat, to drink, enjoy oneself in one's labor during the few years of his life which God has given him, for this is his reward. This is ordained by God. You should enjoy what you're doing. You should be living your passion. You should be living your dream. And so my question to you is, are you living your calling? Many of you are. But if you aren't, my challenge to you is, there's probably a way to still win at this. It may look different. It may be financially different than what you're doing. It doesn't just always involve financial success. Ultimately, it's doing what you are called to do. It's giving yourself the permission to do it and doing what God has put in your heart. So that's my challenge to you today. So there's some great books that I think I found very helpful. Some of these are very recently published books. Mind Shift, which is essentially about how to change your current life circumstances to maybe pursue entirely different things. Grit, I think, is essential to be a success. Mindset is another great book. Man's Search for Meaning, actually, is a little bit to the left field, but it's got some great points in there as well. So I hope you found this presentation helpful and inspiring today, and if you would like a copy, please contact Jeff. Thank you very much.
Let's give Gary a round of applause. Thank you so much, man. Wow. Have a seat, have a seat.
Thank you.
Please start lining up if you have some questions. That was a fire hydrant of incredible information. I'm literally sitting in the back thinking, I am in shock to think how somebody can accomplish what has been accomplished and still maintaining the character and values that you've been able to consistently keep all the way through. And I've heard it in other people that you've worked with, talked with, invested in, and it's truly an inspiration to me to see what you've done. And it's really, truly to the glory and honor of God. And I just want to say thank you for your witness that you've been to the world. Yeah, please, glory to God. And man, there was so much information. But I want to start off. Last year during Fruition Lab, we got a chance to speak with your wife, Sophia. She was there, and we got to talk about the role of women in entrepreneurship. And I want to carry on that same conversation, because in your presentation, you mentioned that the value of your wife's belief in you. And the question I want to ask you is, what qualities attracted you to your wife early on before you became successful? And single guys, be taking notes.
Well, apart from the fact that she's a good-looking girl, I think that the number one thing was she accepted me for the crazy, unconventional person that I was. And, and I had some rough edges. So she was gracious with those. And I think the thing was we could talk with authenticity for hours. Sometimes we'd talk just about all night. So I think that's when I realized that I had a soulmate and somebody that I could trust.
Very good. Thank you. Take notes, gentlemen. Very good. Now, one of the things you mentioned is that the best niches are those that have strong values. What are some examples of other companies that you've seen that have portrayed that in the market as beyond what you've been able to do?
So one, I guess you'd say, other entrepreneur that I have a lot of admiration for. Actually, there's a couple, but so obviously Steve Jobs has his whole values of simplicity and that nothing trumps the user experience, that everything has to be about the experience. So I think that's great. You also have Elon Musk that is very values driven. Now I think he's misguided in the sense that he truly believes that he's going to save the planet. He'll be the salvation of mankind by starting a colony on Mars. He didn't get the message about that there's another spaceship coming to get us before then, right? But he really believes that, and he's putting his money and his heart, he's putting everything behind that. So you got to admire that.
Yeah, and I find it interesting that Elon Musk is still struck, even though he has success, he's been able to do so many literally astronomical things, and he's still struck with the finiteness of humanity. And you see in his attempts to try to expand humanity, save the earth, still at the end of the day, he senses his humanity, which is interesting. One of the other questions I wanted to ask is, what do you feel like has been your greatest driving force to do what you do, to invent, to create, to continue doing it? Because most people, you think you succeed, why not just stop, enjoy life, and keep going? What is that single driving force that keeps you moving forward?
So as a child, and I don't mean this in a metaphysical sense, but I saw the inventing and the practice of technology very much like being able to practice tangible magic. So it's being able to do things that you just couldn't do before, that in some manner would make your life better or enable you to do or be more than you could otherwise be. And so even today, that's what still drives me, is this vision of the possibilities of what you could do.
From a Christian perspective, what do you see as our unique perspective in being able to be entrepreneurs and contribute to the world and solve some of these problems that we see in the world? Does it take being a Christian or not?
Well, obviously being a Christian is, I believe it's an advantage because you have an underpinning of values. So much time in business, you're dealing with people which are amoral, and the only question they have is, will the law allow me to get away with this? And oftentimes they'll exploit that to exploit you or other people by getting the financial upper hand. I approach things with there's plenty to go around. So it's important to keep your word, to keep your promises, and to have integrity. And in the short term, you might be less far ahead compared to the exploitations you could have gained advantage of. But in the long term, reputation and looking yourself in the mirror, I think enables you to go deeper and to go further. But there's a bigger point to this, and that is that of creation. God created us. He gave us the gift of procreation, but He also ordained us with the gift of creation. Yeah. And that is to be able to envision things in your mind, and then, He said to go forth, to have dominion over the earth. Yeah. So in other ways, He was saying, go on, guys, make this a better place, is what He's saying. So this is the challenge to the innovator and the inventor in all of us. It's ordained by God.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by that. The idea of being able to take an immaterial thought and make it a material reality in the world, whether it's an iPhone, some kind of technology, or anything that's created in the world originated in somebody's mind, whether it's the mind of God or the mind of the Creator. Cool. Let's go ahead and start with some of these questions. Go ahead.
G'day, Gary. We first met as I was starting university, and you were leaving Australia with Colourbox to start your first company.
Okay, yeah.
And it's been amazing. Elon Musk talked about the tall poppy syndrome in Australia. And I guess as somebody that's creating Collaboratory as a startup incubator to try and help not only missionaries be entrepreneurs, but actually help entrepreneurs to be missionaries, I'm just interested in your insights on what is it that we can do to help Aussie Australian Christians have that sense that they can achieve these big visions like you have.
Can you explain the tall poppy syndrome?
Yeah. So tall poppy syndrome is the idea that you have a meadow or maybe a garden of poppies, and they're all about the same height, and you have one that is on a stalk that's grown up a lot taller. The gardener's going to come along and whack that one off because it kind of messes the look of the garden. It doesn't look right. And that very much is a cultural phenomenon, both in Australia. I think it's a throwover from the British era. Australia in particular being a colony that started from convicts, there's a great animosity towards any sort of lordship or anyone lording anything over you. So anybody that is achieving higher tends to be accused of, oh, you think you're so good, don't you? Yeah, you're flaming great, aren't you? Yeah. So that tends to get beaten out of you. So a lot of great things about Australian culture. Unfortunately, that's not one of them. But I think the antidote to it really is the points I was making about understanding, don't do what failures do, so understand what failures do and don't do it. And the second is studying success and just kind of putting the rest of the stuff out of your mind, realizing that the principles of success really do work. They're unstoppable. And if you focus those, you embody them, success is virtually guaranteed to come sooner or later.
Very good, thank you. I have a question. You talked about the struggles of entrepreneurship, discouragement, depression. I myself, have attempted suicide. I understand the darkness of taking a risk, not being understood by people. Talk about some of the things that you use to get you through some of those dark, discouraging depressions as an entrepreneur. When you feel like you failed, when you don't feel like you've seen the light at the end, what are some of the things that help pull you through those times?
I know everybody in this room has been through dark times. To the point where it is deadly dark. And I think in those times, sometimes you just got to take time out and lick your wounds. You just have to go somewhere entirely new, somewhere where you can get away from some of the reminders of maybe the things that didn't work out. Whether that's a marriage that didn't work out. I haven't experienced that, but some of you have, or a business, or any number of ventures ways that you can fail in life. But failure is not who you are. Failure is it's an event, and it's always in the past. It's never in the future, unless you choose it to be. And so recognizing that you can choose a different outcome, a different future. It may not even involve financial success, because there's no guarantees that if you do what is on your heart, that you're going to be better off financially for it. You may be a lot worse off. And in my 20s, I was completely busted broke. I mean, I was po in my 20s.
You are.
And a lot of my friends, they were graduating with their master's degrees. They were earning hundreds of thousands of dollars a year and driving new Lexuses. And basically, they would kind of talk to me almost like, you're really doing it all wrong. And all through school, the teachers were telling me, you're doing it all wrong. And it wasn't until my 30s that it paid off. So you have to be prepared to forbear with the cost of success, which is the cost of striving and the cost of learning.
Any more questions?
Thank you, Gary, for being vulnerable and walking us through some of the painful experiences of your childhood and early adolescence. As part of your presentation, you mentioned how you were rejected and condemned by your church, bullied, how your teacher psychologically abused you. Your presentation also mentioned that a mentor preyed on your vulnerability and tried to molest you, and that your father did not think that your work was legitimate in technology. The Bible says that all things work together for the good of those who love God. So my question to you is, as you look at your life in retrospective and you look at those painful experiences, do you really see that those painful experiences worked out together for your good? Was there any meaning in the pain that you experienced?
Yeah, it's a good question. Like, did all those ingredients go in the pot to make a better entrepreneur? Taking the traditional pathway of success, which many people are blessed to have been able to take. So I'm not denigrating that. But just imagine if I had taken the rainbow path. I probably would have made a fantastic employee for someone. I would have had all the gold stamps, and I would be very impressed with myself, and probably feel as though that those accomplishments were entitled to carry me. And like I say, pain is a great teacher. I don't think that I would choose a lot of those things again, but I don't think as a young child I had a lot of choice in them. It's just one of those. It's just one of those things. It definitely pushed me the non-traditional pathway, and if I hadn't taken the non-traditional pathway, then I would have done things traditionally, and probably wouldn't have been the innovator.
Firstly, thank you for sharing. Amazing story and very inspiring. My question is more about the businesses that failed. How long is too long before you let go an opportunity and move to the next one?
Well, I mean, you want to have some wisdom about you whipping a dead horse. So I think if you study business planning, you study what it takes to run a business, you can identify after a while if you're just never going to get there. I mean, if the trajectory just always is this, no matter how much effort and time you put into it, the real question you need to be asking yourself, you're going to fail for one of three reasons probably. It's going to be you got the market wrong. People don't want what you've got to offer, or they don't want it enough. It's not that much better enough for them to take the risk of going with you. So you've got to have the integrity and the honesty with yourself to to evaluate that continually. The second reason it could fail is because of technology. Maybe what you're trying to do is too hard and it can't be solved. And if that's the case, then there's not going to be enough money or enough time to get you there. And understanding and seeing that trajectory and then getting off is another reason. Well, the third reason is management risk. So maybe you don't have what it takes to be able to do this. And if you finally get to the point you realize, you know what, I just maybe don't have the knowledge I need to cure cancer, you might have to let go of that, and change the goal. If you can't bring others on board that can fill in for that deficit.
Hi. You mentioned that we need to do what God is calling us to do. How did you find out what God called you to do, and how does a person find out what they're called to do?
Yeah, look, I think if you're waiting for Gabriel to come down and, have a glowing angel wake you in the middle of the night and anoint you with your, with your calling, that doesn't happen very often. A few times in recorded history, I think Samuel, maybe, a few others, but Mary. I think you have to trust your heart, what is put in your heart. You could argue, hey, you know what? And this was the conundrum. Growing up in a small country town in Australia, in a very strong Adventist community, there was only 3 careers as a young man that you were really considered to be a Christian. One was to be a missionary, the second was to be a teacher, and the third was to be a pastor. If you're a girl, it was basically you're going to be a nurse, you're going to be a teacher, or maybe a secretary. Anything else was considered to be chasing the world, and everybody knows that it's harder for a rich man to get through, it's harder for a camel to get through the eye of a needle, which everyone knows is impossible, right, than for a rich man to get to heaven. Problem is, we're all rich. In this country, every single one of us are rich. So either that means that none of us are going to heaven, or it means that maybe that it meant something a little bit different. And I kind of look at it like this. I could have gone this other route, and I would have been miserable if I had have been the teacher or the pastor. It's just not me, because I'm so driven to create, to invent, and to try to do things to push things forward. Maybe there was innovative ways that I could have done that, but the voices were saying, if you're chasing business, you're chasing the world, and chasing the world is wrong. There is nothing wrong with making money. Again, going back to Ecclesiastes, essentially the word from God is, you should enjoy the work of your life. This should be something you're passionate about, and I think that's how you know whether you're following God's will. I've talked to my wife about this, that a sheepdog has got to chase sheep. Just has to, right? We had a border collie, and trying to get it not to chase things, you couldn't. And that's what I have to do. If I try to do something else, I'll be frustrated. I'm not going to be filling God's vision. This is God's vision for me, is to be an entrepreneur and to be an inventor. And I can bless other people either financially or with my relationships, or maybe by sharing the principles of success, to help each other just to be that little bit more successful.
Thank you. Do you have a few more minutes? Are you good with this? Are you guys good with this? Yeah. You have a few more minutes? Can we keep going a little while longer? Do we have, 2 more, and then I have a closer. 3 more, and then we have a closer. Quick, short, no two-part, 3-part, 4-part.
It's kind of a broad question, but I'll narrow it down for you specifically. For those of us of like younger generations, and you at one point, obviously, what did you do in your life to like push away distractions? And like for me, for example, specifically like entertainment, so like TV, movies, my phone, are there tips that you could give those of us here, how you did that, like, to maintain focus?
Yeah.
Maybe you could talk about work-life balance and how do you balance the two?
Okay. All right. So I think there's two related questions there. One is how do you stay focused, and the other is how do you have balance in your life. So I think if you really have a vision that's driving you, it's not hard to be focused. You just have to believe that vision is worthwhile enough. And you have to be prepared to make sacrifices, because it absolutely is going to take sacrifices. If you don't understand that, then you're not going to give up what you need to do it. You have to ask yourself the question, is this going to help me get to where I want to go? Or, is this going to be helpful? Sometimes just relaxing and watching, an episode of Silicon Valley is, just what you need.
Yes.
So it's giving yourself permission to change gears, but to get back to the task that matters. The bottom line is don't procrastinate. Because if you're procrastinating, you're setting the direction and the tempo for the rest of your life, the direction of the rest of your life, and it's just a failing. It's not going to work. Today, you have to realize today matters, and today is today, and I'm going to work on it today. As far as balance goes, there's been times, I kind of look at a startup being like a newborn. They have incredible needs, they're crying a lot, and they crap their nappy a lot. And if you ignore those things, bad things happen. So you don't get to choose when the baby's sick, when the baby cries, when the baby has to have a nappy change. You just got to roll with it. And sometimes that is all-consuming. I mean, it'll take everything you've got and more, and you have to decide when you're not going to give it more than all you've got. Sometimes if you don't focus on it, the wheels will fall off. And so you have to really go through those all-consuming times, but you're trying to get it to a more manageable time to where you can step back a little bit and have some work-life balance, exercise, and so forth.
Jono.
Hey. Thanks for your presentation, Gary. Now, when it came to making more money in your business and being around communities that sometimes were toxic, you mentioned some of them, a lot of people that are doing big things in the world, there's a whole bunch of people in my experience that have corrupted motives, and so there's this covetousness and clamoring. And how did you and how do you shield yourself from that and getting in your head and being like, whether it's money driven, money obsessed, or covetous in your own life? And then when it comes to then being generous and giving and just seeing where God's leading with that, how do you exercise that? Because when your bank account gets as big as what it can, right? And how do you continually exercise that muscle so you don't close up that part of what you've been given?
Yeah, you'd like to live in a world where everyone can be face value, where everything that everybody says is true, and everybody is, essentially not going to take advantage of you. That is absolutely not the world we live in, and you'll find that as your company grows from within. So you'll have nefarious actors that are looking to either politic or to outright try to take a piece of you or take a piece of what you got through illegitimate means. You'll also find it once people see your success, either they'll come at you and want a piece of you either criminally, or they'll want it through some sort of scamming you, or there'll be, there's the confidence schemes where they'll act as though they're your closest friend. I mean, I've had phenomenal betrayals from people that we thought were people that were in our weddings, people that we'd known for 15, 20 years that betrayed us and tried to take shots at us legally that were completely unbased, because they thought, gee, hey, if it stuck, they could, they'd be made.